tiny bit about me first, okay? So for a good part of the first decade of my career, I was on the tools. I was a technology consultant, contractor, worked in for various companies, various industry sectors. And then for the second 10 years of my career, I became more a project management, change practitioner, and delivered a lot of investments for quite some varied companies and quite big companies, and that's what I did. And towards the end of that period, I had an increasing focus on security and regulatory compliance, because that was what a lot of companies were investing in, and they looked to guys like me to make those changes. And then a few months ago, I started working for DocAuthority, having been a DocAuthority customer twice, quite serendipitously. And DocAuthority and I came to the conclusion that wouldn't it be great if I came and worked for the company. So here I am. Now our CEO, Steve Abbott, he's quite the joker, and he said to me, "Hey, you're doing this wisdom of crowds thing."
Put the mic up.
Sorry, Emma.
Thank you.
Is that better now? Good. So Steve Abbott, quite the joker, and he said to me, "I want you to get in a quote from a long dead poet." I said, "I think I can do that, Steve." And he said, "And I want a limerick." And I said, "Pardon me? I want a limerick in your slide deck for Wisdom of Crowds." And I said, "Well, it's a big ask. I'll see what I can do." Okay. So first box, we've managed to put a tick in. So Oscar Wilde, ahead of his time. Okay. And the reason why I included this particular quote, is in the current landscape that we all live in, we've got employees who access data and they might exfiltrate it or use it for the wrong purposes. We've got state-sponsored hackers. I shall carry on right up until the point that I can't, so I feel like that's the only thing I can do at this point. We've got state-sponsored hackers who want it. We've got competitors who want it. We've got script kiddies, who the heck are they, who are earning rep with it. And then we've got a couple of new things. We've got journalists who've become activists, and that's things like the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers. And then the other day I thought, well, we've actually got activists who I think are becoming journalists. And we've got Privacy International, who are going after organisations and generally making noise and fuss where perhaps it would be preferable sometimes if they didn't. And we've got all these people who are going after data, and of course the regulator and the auditors. So, as I say, as Oscar Wilde perhaps put it best. And then every now and again, a guy comes along and he's one of your employees and he knows where the data is, and you've got a lawful basis for processing that data. It's absolutely marvellous. And the purpose for which he's going to put it to is entirely legitimate, and that's what he gets, which is a real shame, and there's a certain irony to that. Okay. So, to understand this a little bit, and I think it's important to understand this a little bit, I want us to go on a little bit of a thought exercise. Okay. So, here's obviously some shelves with lots of boxes on. Okay, and this is what off-site paper storage looks like. And we could imagine boxes full of paper, and on the side of those boxes is written perhaps a business unit, a date, the owner, the summary of the contents that's in there, okay? And all of that's very useful, okay? That enables that data to be used in some shape or form. But let's just take, for example, this idea that maybe we've got a few thousand boxes and they don't have a date on, they don't have a business unit or a business owner, they don't have any content written on the side, and we don't know what's in there. And that's a problem, because no one's ever going to retrieve it, because no one knows what's in there. You can't make the case to scan it and do some fancy OCR and review it, because you don't know what's in there, so you don't know if there's a business case for doing it. So essentially, we can come to a view that that data has no practical business value whatsoever. It will sit there indefinitely until something is done with it. But it's still costing you money, that much you know, and it still presents a risk. You can still breach it. There are still some compliance principles about accuracy and data minimization and all that sort of thing. So it's got no value, but it does have risk and costs attached to it. Okay? And when we perhaps think of our data, we like to think of it, even in the digital world, we like to think of it on shelves, in boxes. But sometimes our data actually looks more like that, okay? And that perhaps is something that we're not very comfortable with. It's an image which is at odds with perhaps how business sees its data. But if we don't know what we've got, we don't know where it is, we don't know who's got access to it, and we don't know the date range on it, then it more resembles that than it does the boxes of documents on shelves. There's no doubt in my mind. And that is where that last question came from, okay? We have some reason to believe in DocAuthority, because we see it with our customers fairly routinely, that there is an absence of controls that corresponds to the storage of files and documents in enterprise, okay? So we don't like to tell customers that they're sitting on an enormous mountain of waste paper. We don't think that's quite the messaging that we like to use. So we tend to use this when we talk to them about having this great bucket of miscellaneous nuts and bolts, okay? And that is quite a portable and compelling message for our customers. They get it, they get that, and they're reasonably comfortable with it. But then they sometimes do something a bit odd next, okay? And they realise they've got all this data, and people are starting to realise that they need to do something about it, and that's what they do. Okay. So when you've got all this data that might have national insurance numbers in it, it might have credit card information in it, it might have postcodes, names, addresses, etc., etc. Okay, well, what we really want is we want to know where all those violations are, and I want a spreadsheet full of them so I can do something with it. And that's a trap, okay? That's not the route to go. And the reason for that is that there is simply no question to which the answer is a spreadsheet with 1 million violations, my limerick notwithstanding. But it's no one's job to fix that. There's no benefit in fixing that. It's a hiding to nowhere, okay? And looking towards my background in project management, which I did for many, many, many years, that's a project that's going to fail. Okay, it's going to be difficult to sponsor, it's going to get difficult to get stakeholder engagement, it's going to be difficult to sustain momentum, and really difficult to communicate the benefits to anyone, okay? And straight away, I'm starting to feel that that's going to be a lonely job. So we don't really want to go that route, I don't think, but people do, and I think lessons need to be learned there. So one of our founders, Ariel Peled, who's Israeli, and he works in the field of artificial intelligence. And I heard him say something once, and it sort of resonated with me. And he said, the hardest part of fixing any problem is deciding which problem you're actually going to fix, okay? And the problem that DocAuthority fixed is we took that rusty bucket of bolts and nuts and washers and springs, and we did that with it, okay? Now our solution does quite a few different things. It's a bit of a Swiss Army knife, but it does one thing very, very well. And as far as we know, it does this thing that it does, no one else does, as far as we know. We'd be pleasantly surprised when someone turns up. We sort those nuts and bolts and springs and circlips and wing nuts into groups, logical groupings of stuff that's the same, okay? And when you do that, a whole bunch of stuff becomes possible. Okay, let me just catch up on my notes for 2 seconds here. So I was with a customer about 4 weeks ago, okay, and we'd had our software installed in their estate, and we'd ingested it and analysed it and do what we do. And we sat down with the customer, and we found 35,000 P11Ds. Okay, now I don't know if you know what a PLMD is, I haven't seen one myself for quite a while, but it's a form used by the Inland Revenue, and it's covered in what you paid in tax, what you paid in national insurance, the benefit in kind you got for your company car. It's probably got a name, an address, a national insurance number on, so it's kind of in the sensitive personal information space, in one shape or form or another. So we found 35,000 of these documents, and we found them in most of them, not all of them, we found most of them in 37 different folders, on 4 different servers, in 2 different countries. And we found a significant portion of these PLMDs were accessible by NT authenticated, which probably means something to this audience, okay? NT authenticated means if I've logged onto the domain, I can access these documents, okay? And the customer was quite surprised by this. And he said, well, what can you do to help us deal with that? And we said, well, don't worry. We've got this little wizard here, we'll run you a script and we can say, take all of these, oh, by the way, sorry, one thing I forgot. We also were able to establish that the date range of those files, 13,500 of them were beyond the customer's retention period. So we used our tool to say, right, put all of the files that are beyond retention over here for a month and see if anyone helps, and if they don't, then maybe we can euthanize those, but that's a business decision, not a DocAuthority decision. And we said, can we consolidate the rest down to fewer locations so we can control the access permissions on there? And we said, yes, we can do that as well. And we were in meeting room 1 later in the day, which is the pub over the road from the office. And my colleague was recounting this to one of our other colleagues who hadn't been there. He said, yeah, how things go with the customer? And we said, yeah, we helped them with their managing their personal data and went through the situation. And he said, well, how long did it take to do all that? 3 to 4 minutes was how long that took. So when you take your bucket of nuts and bolts and you put them and sort them, then all sorts of things become really, really easy to do, okay? And when you also do that, some other really useful use cases come to the fore. So one of our other customers said, I've got 3 business units and I want to turn it into 2 business units. So I want to deconstruct an entire file share and redistribute all those documents into the other 2 business units. Could your tool help us do that? And we said, well, yes, of course it can. Because we can split those documents up into discrete groups of documents that are all the same, and then we can send the documents you want over to business group A, and we can send the documents that you want to go to business group B to business group B, if we can do that. And you've probably heard the term ROT, redundant, obsolescent, and trivial files. Okay, so Veritas writes about this. Okay, apparently up to 30% of files on a network are ROT. Okay, stuff you're just never going to need, choking up the network. Our tool's pretty good at that as well. Okay, mergers and acquisitions. Okay, someone divesting themselves of a bit of an organisation, or someone acquiring another organisation, will be quite good at that as well. So when you take this bucket of nuts and bolts and you sort it, then all sorts of things become possible. Okay, so DocAuthority give you one corner of the triangle. Okay, I think there are 3. Other views will undoubtedly exist. So we tell you what you've got, where you've got it, who's got access to it, and how old it is. Okay, it's in unprecedented technicolor. Okay, and that's useful. But I think there are 2 other bits of information that you need. Okay, not just 1 limerick, 2. Okay, always over-deliver. So this is the story about Morrisons. Okay, which for me is fairly seismic, but I'm not the best guy to make sweeping judgments about what is or is not seismic in the field of cybersecurity. So, disgruntled employee, we've all been there, okay, whose job was to pass sensitive payroll data and HR data to the auditors. That was his job, okay, wakes up one morning and says, well, I will do that, but before I've done that, I'll just send it to the newspapers, the internet, my aunt, and a few other dozen people as well. Not a great day for anyone. So he gets sent to jail for computer misuse and huge fine and all the rest of it, and that's just the thing. And then Morrisons end up in a ton of trouble because of this thing called vicarious responsibility, which everyone here might know more about than I do, but I didn't know a heck of a lot about it until I read this. And because the guy was working for Morrisons and he was doing his job, well, Morrisons, you're blameworthy. And now you're going to go through litigation with all of those people who grouped together and funded a law firm to come after you. And Morrisons didn't like this, so they went to appeal, and they lost the appeal. And now they're also on their way to the Supreme Court. So when we had our question a minute ago with Amar, what's big in 2019? There was one guy who wrote down vicarious responsibility. I don't suppose anyone else did, but that was my word that might be big in 2019. Because if Morrisons do lose on appeal, it seems to me there's at least a 50% chance they will, changes the game for me. Okay, if companies are going to be held responsible for the actions of employees in those sorts of circumstances, then it's going to drive people's decision making on how they manage their data. Okay, so just to recap, okay, we know what we've got, we know where it is. Okay, I do have another slide. Sorry, I haven't quite finished that point. So the changing face of regulatory enforcement, okay, is another factor in our equation. DocAuthority gives you some really good metrics, what you've got, where you've got it, etc., etc. But we know the regulatory landscape changes. And then we've got these guys, who I hadn't heard of until the other day, called Duff and Phelps. Quite possibly the biggest company you've never heard of, I don't know. Just a show of hands for anyone that heard of Duff and Phelps. Fantastic, fantastic. So Duff and Phelps, about 3,500 of them worldwide, and they work on intellectual property, maximising the value of intellectual property for customers. That's what they do. Just turns out my pal went to work for them, which is why I'd heard of them. And they produce these two reports, which tell you who's getting fined, how much, in which area of the globe, by whom. Marvellous, okay? It's really what you need, because a lot of the regulation is there, you know, it's one of the drivers of security and compliance and da-da-da-da-da. And I've pinched a little bit of their content just to show you the sort of stuff that's in there. And these reports are so detailed. It's granular. So we can see grey is, let me just remind myself. Grey bars are the frequency of fines by category 2013 to 2017. Orange is the first half of 2018. You can see some significant changes in there, okay? Privacy and cybersecurity, it's only a minnow, but it has gone up 3 times, okay? And then you've got the amounts, okay? Privacy and cybersecurity, it's so small you can't even see it. It's gone up 15 times, okay? So those reports from Duff and Phelps, that's another piece of the puzzle, okay? We know what we've got, we know who's got access to it, we know how old it is, we know where it is, we now have really, really granular information on the regulatory landscape. Who's getting fined, by who, where, and it really is significant. If you're in America, it's one thing you've got to worry about. If it's in APAC, something completely different. UK, different again, okay? So that's relevant, particularly for companies that are custodians of data in different global regions. So that's 2 parts of the puzzle, okay? DocAuthorities or other tools like it, if only there was one, okay, is giving you unparalleled visibility of your unstructured data, about time too. Duff and Phelps, very kindly, oh, and by the way, you don't pay for this, go to the website, download it. That's how complicated that is, okay? Telling you where should we be putting our controls, where are the people getting fined, the big fines, or likely to get fined. What next? Well, value of data, and that's a complicated topic, because everyone thinks data is worth something different, and then data has a half-life. It gets worth less over time, okay? But that curve changes depending on what the data is. And then we've got other data. It's worth a certain amount to the company if it's got to rebuild it, but it's spectacularly expensive if you breach it, okay? So data's a really tough thing to say, you know, what's valuable, what do I need to protect, okay? So this was the other part of the puzzle. And who's heard of Larry Ponemon? Larry Ponemon, a few more hands, good. Ponemon Institute, okay, so Larry Ponemon has done quite a bit of work over the years. He's a boutique analysis house, basically, for data. So he did some work a while back saying, you know, what's the economic model that gets people to run cyber attacks and steal data? Why do they do it? How do we stop them doing it from an economics perspective? Do we make it just expensive enough for it not to be worth their while? And he's quoted quite often. So DocAuthority partnered with Larry Ponemon over the last few months, and around about 2,800 information professionals were surveyed in the US and the UK. And I've seen an early copy of the report, and it's really eye-opening, okay? And we've got a webinar on the 28th of this month, and you can all attend. It's not an invite-only event, you know. We'll make sure that anyone has the details. And Doug Laney, okay, so he's the Gartner analyst who wrote Infonomics, okay? He's going to come and co-present that session. And that is where we are going to lift the lid on what data is worth what, in what department. What is it worth if a competitor nicks it? What is it worth if you breach it? What is it worth if you just happen to lose it and recreate it? What is it worth in year 1 as opposed to year 3? Okay? In HR, in legal, in finance, in R&D. Okay? So what we've tried to give you here, okay, we're trying to give you the tools that give you unprecedented detail on your unstructured data. There's loads of players in the structured data space, okay? Got all your data in a database, it's a certain type of problem. Got all your data all over the place in SharePoint, network file shares, OneDrive, etc., and it's no one's job to fix it. That's a whole different level of complexity. So DocAuthority is doing its best to provide the tools and the solutions to sort that, and we are doing that for customers right now. We have surfaced to you today the reporting from Duff Phelps, giving you an unprecedented, for me at least, insights into the regulatory landscape. Okay, very, very useful. And at the end of this month, we're publishing a report, co-publishing, co-authoring with the Ponemon Institute on the value of data. Okay. Now, right at the start of this exercise, we talked about a spreadsheet with 1 million violations, and I said that sounded like project failure, and it does. Don't know if anyone else got a view on it. This feels like a lot more chance of success. Okay, we've got all the information we need to make good decisions. Okay, we can get the business buy-in. Okay, we can get the DocAuthority is a tool of business. It's not a tool of IT. It's not a tool of InfoSec. It's the business's data. If we don't give the business a tool to manage their own data, we might as well go home. So that's what DocAuthority is. That's what we're for. Thank you for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We're out in the foyer, obviously, all day. My colleague, Mike Quinn, in the corner, gives a wave, Mike. Is also here, and my other colleague, Jeremy Freeman, over there. Okay, we'd be delighted to talk to any of you during the course of today. Thank you very much.